in that transition, which is great.
All right, protectionism. Let's look to Saskatchewan now. One of the young guys in the office said, I don't even know how to spell that, let alone pronounce it. It's a prairie province in Canada, where I come from. Probably the world's biggest takeover has just bitten the dust. Tell us what happened, James.
Yeah, it didn't go so well. I mean, I guess it's been rejected by the Canadian government, and that's big news. As we've heard in the past that the Canadians have been pretty open to trade and to investment into their economy.
Absolutely, they are big free traders from way back.
So the fact that they've rejected this, that's not only for their economy but for the globe. It sort of shows where things have been going. There's been a lot of talk over the past couple of months about protectionism, and this is a big step in terms of what's happening there.
Murray, the BHP Billiton out of Australia wanted to pump $39 billion to buy this company. The Canadian government has said no. But isn't it a case really of the government intervening in what the market said they wanted to happen?
Well, the market actually hasn't said it wants to happen. BHP is a hostile, and unwelcome.
But the markets were pretty keen on it.
Well, the price has actually gone above the BHP Billiton. Offer price was $130, and the market price is now $140. And the chairman or president of Potash Corp has come out and said, the bid wasn't acceptable, and the board had unanimously rejected it. So BHP's really got two problems. First of all, the government has said, hey, we don't think there's enough net economic benefit for Canada out of this deal, and therefore we're turning it down, at least in the first instance. BHP's got 30 days, I think it is, to appeal about that decision. But even if the government did allow it, it seems to me that the company doesn't think the price is high enough.
Okay, let's hear from Potash Corp's CEO, Bill Doyle, himself.
Potash Corp's board of directors, with the assistance of its independent financial and legal advisors, thoroughly reviewed BHP's unsolicited offer of $130 per share, and we unanimously concluded that this offer is wholly inadequate and not in the best interests of our company, our shareholders, or our other stakeholders. Let me give you a summary of our board's reasoning. In essence, we believe that, first, Potash Corp is uniquely valuable. We have a product that has no substitute and assets that are unparalleled in our industry. The potash business has significant barriers to entry, which is why there are only a small number of producers anywhere in the world. Economically viable deposits are rare. And even if you have a deposit, it takes a long time and a lot of money to bring a new mine to production. We have been patiently building and managing our assets for more than 20 years. And you won't find another company like ours anywhere in the world.
I wonder, James, do you see any parallels between that rejection by the Canadian government of a big natural resource, which, let's face it, is going to have a lot to do with global prices of food moving forward, correct? Are there any parallels between that and the sale of the Crayford farms, for example, here in New Zealand?
Oh, and there's no question that there are some parallels there. They're trying to protect some of the big resources that they have on offer. That's going to contribute to their economy, potentially over the next generation or generations. Fertilizer, of course, is going to be key for the driving of food, and continuing to supply that food. That's going to be an important part of feeding the world down the track. And of course, for us here in New Zealand, and it's a big part. We are able to produce that food. We're going to need the fertilizer. They're in very, very similar camps, and we're looking long term here.
So, Murray, let me put you on the hot seat. If you were the Canadian Prime Minister and you had to make the call whether or not that Potash Corp deal went ahead or not, what would you have done?
Well, I think if I would have been a politician in this context, I would have been listening to what the local soundings were giving, and it seems to me that local Canadian soundings would be, send the foreigner away.
Hold on to it.
And therefore, you'd be pretty brave to, at least at the first hurdle, to actually say, yes, they actually can take it over.
Yeah, I think the big problem that the Canadian government's going to have, as they will here in New Zealand as well, is that they have said yes to so many big foreign ownership deals of natural resources. I'm thinking of companies like Alcan, Stelco, Falconbridge. I mean, the gates have been wide open. Now they're closing. Is this a trend we're likely to see in governments around the world? James?
Potentially, I think I mean we're at a time where we've come through a big economic shock. I think that it does have perhaps has an impact. They want to protect how they're going to be going down the track and over the next 10, 20, 30 years, and they've got some good opportunities to grow their economies out of their natural resources and what they have on the land. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit more of that. We are seeing it in some other instances too.
Okay, closer to home, South Canterbury Finance. Murray, where are we at with all of this? I see 2 more companies are now in receivership linked to South Canterbury Finance, and Alan Hubbard, of course, remains under big investigations.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think South Canterbury Finance, as we knew it, is dead and gone. They're trying to find a buyer for the good, what they call the good part of the bank. They're trying to find buyers for the assets like Scales and Dairy Holdings and helicopters. But it's absolutely staggering to me, the sort of stuff that the Reserve Bank and Treasury have really been dumping out into the public on what they knew about what has been going on there for so long. And really, I think there has to be some huge questions asked for, what were the role of the regulators through all this. I mean, the sceptic, you called me a sceptic before. I'd say part of me actually says Treasury was waiting to see whether or not something could happen that would actually lessen the call on the government. They all, for a couple of years, it's clear from the documents that they thought it wasn't a case of if South Canterbury failed, it was when. And what they were trying to do seems to me to be hold open the door in case something came in at the last minute to help them to reduce their loss. And if I was a preference shareholder in South Canterbury that had bought in the last 2 years, I'd be absolutely livid that all this was going on, in the front of the regulators, and they did nothing about it.
I agree. That's been my point all along. Where were the government officials keeping an eye on this? It just seems to me that it was almost negligent and highly irresponsible. They suspected it was in trouble long time ago, as you say, and yet nothing really happened.
Well, they knew it was in trouble, and they just watched.
That's right, and they forked out how many millions of dollars of our money to clean the whole thing up. Do you think there should be a big government commission of inquiry, if you like, into the matter?
Well, I think what the authorities have been doing is dumping all this information to actually stop, having an inquiry. And I'd be very surprised if they allowed an inquiry to happen.
Yeah, they're not going to look good.
Yeah, and I actually think now the reason why the government came out and said that we'll pay every investor, foreigners, people with more than $1 million, and all the rest of it, was because all this information would have become available, and people have said, "Hey, why didn't you step in a lot earlier to lessen our loss?"
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Stay with us. We'll come back. Coming up after the break, how do we do in the World Bank survey of the best countries to do business with? And what did our Finance Minister, Bill English, really think? And what's the insurance bill likely to be for those freak South Island snowstorms? But first, a question for you in our Farmers' Facts and Figures quiz. What percentage of New Zealand men work in agriculture? The puzzle is answered when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Money Talks. Just before the break, we asked you, what percentage of New Zealand men work in agriculture? The answer, 11% of Kiwi blokes labor on the land. Now, the World Bank says New Zealand is the 3rd best country for doing business, but Finance Minister Bill English says there's plenty of room for improvement. What do you reckon, James?
Well, I guess it depends on, are we too friendly? Or, I mean,
are we too soft?
Are we too soft as a friendly nation to do business? And I guess that's a bit of a question to
May
to
Wang
pose.
wouldn't have thought so.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, there's surveys and these surveys. It's good to be up there to promote foreign investment to be coming in, because there is definitely a place for it, but. There's also an area where we may be a little bit too soft for people coming in and opening companies to be doing business and things like that. So.
Murray, the World Bank likes us because they say that we're a quality destination for investment, for example. Would you agree with James that we are perhaps a little too wide open and accepting?
No, I don't think we're necessarily wide open. We have the Overseas Investment Office that that puts people through the ringer on things. I think because we don't save enough ourselves, we are dependent pretty heavily on offshore capital. We've always been dependent on foreign investment. Really, we're not in a great geographic location for the rest of the world. I mean, I describe us as being at the bus terminus rather than, a country like Singapore, which is, right at the centre. They're the hub of everything.
Absolutely, and they're number one on the list, by the way, and I know that John Key, who has worked there, is a big fan of the way they do business. Do you think we should be modelling more on the Singapore prototype?
It's not so long ago that New Zealand was encouraged to be like Iceland and Ireland. Right, and
correct.
I remember all those stories, and I think different cultures have different ways of doing things, and I think what works in Singapore won't necessarily work in New Zealand. Equally, what works in New Zealand won't necessarily work in Singapore.
So, what do you think really works in New Zealand? What should we be doing more of, Murray?
The best thing that we're at is actually grass-fed agriculture. And the biggest problem is that the rest of the world's not prepared to take our products at prices that they're prepared to pay their own domestic farmers. And I think we just got to keep chipping away at agricultural protectionism.
Down south now, Southlanders have put in insurance claims of $47 million over the freak snowstorms. What's that going to mean for the economy now? We've had a bit of time to think about it and look at the trends. You've been working that calculator.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has a big impact on the Southland area because they've lost a lot of stock. It's going to have a big impact on their cash flow. But when you talk about it, $47 million is a lot of money. But when you talk about it in the grander scale of the New Zealand economy, then it's actually like a relatively small amount. So it probably won't have a big impact on the overall New Zealand economy, but it's going to have an impact on the Southland area and a big impact on the sheep sector for this year, I think.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. Promise me you'll come back sometime soon. Okay. Thanks to my guests, ASB Rural Economist James Shortall and Financial Focus Principal Murray Weatherston. We'd love to hear your feedback, so drop me a line on the website and remember to check out my weekly blog. We'll give the last word to Hubert Humphrey, who once famously said, "I learned more about the economy from one South Dakota dust storm than I did in all my years of college." Keep the faith. See you next time.